Hello, coming at you today with a demo for German style soft pretzels. As always, before you get started, go ahead and wash your hands and tie back any long hair. I'm going to go ahead and start with reading our recipe. So I have my recipe on the phone here. It is 1 cup of warm milk, microwave for 30 to 45 seconds, 2 1/4 teaspoons or 1 packet of rapid rise yeast, 2 tablespoons melted butter, 3 tablespoons brown sugar, 2 1/4 cups all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of salt. And those are all the ingredients for the pretzels themselves. You also will be making a baking soda bath for the pretzels before they go in the oven. So for that, the soda bath dip is 1/4 cup of baking soda and 2 quarts of water. And then you can use any coarse salt that you have, cinnamon sugar, whatever you want to top these with, whatever you like to dipping, mustard, cheese, things like that, whatever you prefer. You also can use whole wheat flour for these. I don't have any at home, so I'm just using regular all-purpose flour, but that's a nice way to add a little more nutrients to your recipe, is adjusting some of those things. So those are the ingredients. Basically, everything just gets mixed together for the pretzels to start. I do have a KitchenAid mixer at home, so I'm going to be using that with the hook attachment, which we'll go over, but I have my KitchenAid mixing bowl, so this is what I'm going to be mixing everything in. So everything will get mixed in there, and you'll need the dough for a while. If you don't have a KitchenAid mixer, you will need the dough by hand, but with the hook mixer on the KitchenAid, it needs it for you. So you can do that, and then you'll have to let it rise for a little bit, and then you'll put it into, we'll shape them into pretzels and then put them into the baking soda bath. So we'll talk about that as we go. So first, I'm just gonna start getting everything measured and ready to go. So our first ingredient is 1 cup of warm milk. So I'm going to start with that so I can put it in the microwave while I'm measuring other things. So I have my liquid measuring cup here. Make sure you have your liquid measuring cup. We're going to measure 1 cup of milk. So again, flat surface, eye level. And you have your cup. So this goes in for 30 to 45 seconds in the microwave. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in. So make sure your measuring cup is microwave safe. So while that is going, I am going to get my package of yeast. So you can just find this at the baking aisle in the grocery store. So these just open up, just gonna use some kitchen shears. And that just goes into the bowl. So that's what yeast looks like if you've never seen yeast. So yeast is a living organism. The reason why we're heating up the milk is because the heat activates the yeast along with the sugar that we're going to be adding. So you always do want to be careful not to add anything too hot with the yeast, otherwise it could potentially kill the yeast and it will not do the purpose. So yeast is a leavening agent which helps your baked products rise. So yeast is a leavening agent, baking soda, baking powder, all have reactions that take place in the recipe and the ingredients, and then they help make your product rise. So with yeast, you do need warm liquid in order for that to happen, and sugar, but if anything too hot could potentially kill it. So you do want to be careful. Some recipes give you a specific temperature range to heat your milk to or your water to, so pay attention to whatever the recipe says. So we have our yeast in here. The microwave just went off, so let me grab the milk. All right, so I have my milk. I ended up putting mine in for a total of, let me add in my head, I put it in for 35 and 20, so 55 seconds, because the first time it was still pretty cold, and I did have a thermometer, so I did take, the temperature, and it's around 110, which is good for yeast. So I'm gonna add this into my mixing bowl. And then the next ingredient is 2 tablespoons of melted butter. So we're gonna melt that in the microwave as well. So I just happen to have 2 tablespoons left in my fridge. So remember, on butter there is measurement marks there. So I'm going to go ahead and unwrap this. You always wanna make sure you unwrap it before you put it in the microwave. And I'm just going to cut it into smaller chunks so it melts faster. And I'm going to put this in for maybe 40 seconds and just keep an eye on it because it will melt fast. So I have my melted butter. I'm just going to let it sit out for a minute or two just to cool off a little bit, because remember we said we don't want to kill the yeast in there. So I'm just going to set this on my countertop for a moment while I measure my next ingredient, which is 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. So I just keep my brown sugar in the bag. So since your hands are nice and clean, all you can do if you have yours in the bag is you can just squish it in the bag. So I squished it down because you do want to pack it down, and then you can just level it off over something. So we need to have 3 tablespoons that we're adding in there. So 1, level off, 2, it's not coming out. Packed it in too hard. 2, and 3. Alright, so that is in with the yeast and the milk. And now I have my melted butter, so I'm going to add that in there as well. So we have that. And now we have 2 1/4 cups of flour, all-purpose flour. Again, you could use whole wheat flour, whatever you like. I'm going to do my 1/4 cup first. So we're going to use our dry measuring cups. Now remember, with flour, when you measure it, you want to stir it around first, because you want everything nice and light and fluffy. And then you're scooping in. And then taking your leveler flat edge, and that goes in the mixing bowl. And we also need 2 cups. So again, just scoop in, stir it around, loosen it up, fluff it up. I'm going to try not to make a huge mess here. Level it off. And that goes in there. I am making a mess, that's okay. And then 1 more. And remember, you just want to scoop in, you don't want to pack it down or anything. Keep it nice and light and airy, because that really can change the measurement a lot, and you don't want to do that. So now we have 2 1/4 cups in there. Let me clean up my space a little bit. And then the last thing that goes into the pretzels is a teaspoon of salt. All right, so a teaspoon of salt. Remember, you always measure over the counter or the sink over something else, because you can kind of see that I'm losing some because my salt wasn't opened the right way. And then over the sink, you can just level it off, and that goes in there. So you have all your ingredients ready to go. So if you watch the cookie recipe, when we have cookies, this attachment on our KitchenAid for the mixer. The hook is used for breads and doughs, because this is what's going to knead your dough. You could just mix this together and then knead it by hand on the countertop, but this saves us a lot of work. So if you have a mixer at home that kneads the bread for you, it saves you a lot of trouble, because this particular recipe says to add all of the ingredients together and then use the regular dough setting and let it knead for 10 to 15 minutes. So you'd either have to do that by hand, or I can just turn my mixer on and let it knead itself. If it's too dry as it's mixing, as you're watching it, you can add a tablespoon of water at a time just to see. But as you're mixing it, as it's going, the dough should form into a ball. So if you still have some straggly bits, you may want to add a little bit of water. So we're going to let that knead for about 10 minutes. So I'll show you just to start, and then I'm not going to make you watch 10 minutes of mixing. But let me get everything situated. Let me move this, and I'll be right back with you. All right, so we are at the mixer here. I just put my bowl in there. I'm now going to attach the hook so it slides in and then turns. It shouldn't come off. And then my bowl lifts up, and you always want to start it on low, especially with flour in here. You don't want to turn it on too high because it will all come out. I'm eventually going to put my flour guard on, but I'm going to flip you around just so you can see it's starting to mix. All right, so here is the dough. It's ready to go. So I'm going to turn this on, and it's just going to start mixing it up. Remember, we're using the hook attachment. And before I let this go, I want to make sure that everything gets combined and mixed up first. So I'm going to turn this up. And you can see that it's starting to combine. I'll probably scrape off the edge there just to get it going with this rubber scraper. And then I will let it go for the 10 minutes. So we'll be back in a little bit. Alright, so this is a good lesson. So the recipe called for 2 1/4 cups of flour. You'll notice that it is not forming a ball and it's still pretty wet, the batter, and nothing's really going to happen with that. So I'm going to add another 1/4 cup of flour to this, and as weird as it may seem, the weather really affects your dough. So today it's kind of hot and humid out, so that really does have an effect on your dough. So you really just need to pay close attention. If it's too wet, add a little bit of flour at a time. If it's too dry, add a little bit of water at a time. But like I said, I'm going to add another 1/4 cup of flour, and hopefully that gets it moving a little bit. Alright, so that extra 1/4 cup was better, but it's still not great. So at this point, I'm going to start adding a tablespoon at a time to see if I can get more of that dough in the middle, like the biggest clump is. So I'm going to add a tablespoon at a time. Alright, so at this point, I have added another 3/4 cup of flour. So the flour total is now up to 3 cups. This has about 4 more minutes on here to knead, and then I'm going to knead this on a countertop, and I'll probably need to add just a smidgen more flour, but I'm going to let it go as is for right now. But most of it is balling up in the center, which is what you want to have happen. Alright, so our dough has been kneading for 10 minutes on the KitchenAid mixer. Like I said in the video, it still needs more flour, so we'll see what we're going to do. So it is still fairly sticky. But like I said, I'm just going to add flour to surface here. I'm just going to put it out on the floured surface. And I will do some hand kneading and add a little bit more of flour as we go. And this will show you how to knead by hand as well. So get out as much of that dough as you can. I'm just going to take flour, sprinkle it on top, and then when you knead it, you're pretty much just folding it on top of each other and moving it around. So, using your bottom of your hand here, this is better. This is a good consistency. So just by adding just that small amount of flour, it is a really great consistency. So you just kind of press it, fold it, and turn it fold it, press, and just turn it around. So if you were kneading this by hand, 10 minutes would be a long time. Your arm would be very tired. So it's nice to have those KitchenAid mixers to be able to do most of the work for you. As it's going, if it's getting sticky, just add some flour. But you really should just have flour on your hands. It shouldn't be dough sticking to you. If that's the case, oh, I forgot to turn my timer off. If the dough is sticky, again, just add more flour. But this is a great consistency here. Should have washed my hands off from before because I do have sticky dough on it. So this recipe calls for 6 to 8 servings of pretzels. So it really depends on what you decide to make. You could roll it all into a log and you could just make pretzel bites. You can divide it into sections and you could make individual pretzels. It's up to you. So I'm just going to try to make this even because I am going to cut it into I'm just going to pull this apart, and then you have little dough balls, hopefully about the same size. You can remove that, and as you go, if you feel like your dough is still a little sticky, you're going to roll these out, but you want to have little dough balls. Try to get similar shapes. If you were in school, you would be measuring these to make sure that everybody had the same size pretzel. I don't have to worry about that too much here. So it looks like I have 7 pieces here. Can you see those? All pretty much the same shape. So I'm just going to work on one at a time. So what you want to do, if you're going to make an actual pretzel, you can knead this dough. And then it's like building Play-Doh or playing with Play-Doh when you were younger and you were always making snakes. You're just going to roll it out. You want to have a nice, long, thin, should be pretty uniform throughout. But you can see that's getting longer. It's not rolling great, but so when you have your log, you go like that, it'll stretch it out a little bit too. You just twist it. You see how I did that? You just twist and kind of pinch your sides together to get your pretzel. So we'll do one more, and then I'll just roll the other ones on my own. But again, you just want to roll it out. Again, if it's too sticky as you're doing this, you can add more flour. This is a pretty good consistency though for the rolling. So if you roll and then kind of pull it apart, you'll get your nice long rope, I guess that's what you can call it. Take the ends and pull them to the inside, cross them, and you have your pretzel. So like I said, you can shape them all into pretzels. You can make a long rope and then just cut them into bite-sized pretzel bites. It's really up to you. So I'm gonna go ahead and make the rest into pretzels, and then I'll come back at you to show you the next step. All right, so here are the pretzels shaped. the next step in the directions is to let these rise for 30 minutes. So I'll be back in 30 minutes for the soda bath. Alright, so these pretzels have been sitting out on the baking sheet to rise for 30 minutes now. So the next step before you put them into the oven is you're going to prepare a baking soda water bath for them. And what you're going to do is you're going to, on the stove, boil water. You can see our water's going to boil here shortly. We're going to get it a little more bubbles. And then add a 1/4 cup of baking soda to that. And the reason for that is that's going to give you a nice crisp outer layer of the pretzel and a nice soft inner layer. You also want to, at this point, preheat your oven to 425. That way it'll be preheating as you go through these different steps. So you will need a slotted spoon. I have just a spatula that I'm going to use that has slots in it. I don't have a slotted spoon that I could find at the moment. So once the water is boiling, so we have our water boiling, we're going to take it off the heat. So I'm just going to move it to another burner while we add our baking soda because it may bubble up. So we have a 1/4 cup of baking soda here. I'm just going to stir that around for a moment. And this is where you have to watch because you can see those boils, it is going to bubble. So basically what you're going to do is take a pretzel at a time. So I'm going to take it on my spatula here. Let me use 2 hands a second. Alright, so I have it on my spatula. I'm going to submerge it. So it's going to submerge for about 30 seconds and then I'm going to flip it over and it will do that same thing on the other side as well. So again, you just want to watch your boiling water because if it's boiling too much, it is going to overflow and you will have a big mess on your hands. So just be mindful and pay attention. So I'm going to just take this and flip it over now. Get the other side. You probably could do 2 at a time. So however big your pan is, if you have 2 that you can do at a time, that would be fine. But like I said, what this is doing is it's going to give it a nice crispy outside and give you that little bit of crunch when you bite into a soft pretzel and then that nice soft warm inside. So I'm going to go ahead and do this with each of the 7 pretzels that I made, and then the next step would be to top them and to bake them. So after I have all of those done, I will come back at you. Alright, so all of these pretzels have been into the baking soda bath and they're ready to top. So you can top with whatever you'd like. I'm going to top with just some coarse salt, but these are also good with cinnamon sugar and stuff too. So I am just going to sprinkle some salt on these here. And you'll notice that there's salt, there's some extra water on this baking sheet. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to bake them in the oven on this baking sheet, only because it comes out pretty messy with baked on salt and stuff. So I have another baking sheet sprayed and ready to go, and I'm just going to transfer over to that one. If you have parchment paper at home, you could get a sheet of parchment paper out and put it on, and that would make it easier too. So I have just a plain baking sheet over here. I sprayed it with some vegetable spray, so I'm going to transfer my pretzels over to this nice clean one and then bake them, and they get baked in a 425-degree oven for about 14 to 16 minutes. So we'll check on those shortly. All right, so these are the finished pretzels. They look so good. I wish I could send you the smell through here too, but this is what they look like when they're done.